Welcome, Prakash. It's great to have you join us. For the benefit of all our ecosystem users and viewers of this video, I'm joined for this session with Prakash Mallya, who's the Managing Director for Intel's Sales and Marketing Group in India. So welcome, Prakash.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Amit.
It's a pleasure. And look, I've always maintained that Intel has a very unique position. And Prakash, I think you and I have had that chat once, having a coffee when you were the MD for Southeast Asia for Intel
Mhm.
in Kalang. Was it in Kalang, your office? Yep. And you and I you have that favorite coffee shop downstairs, and we had that
Yes,
coffee. And I
yes,
said to you then as well, and I maintain it. I think Intel has a very unique position in the entire digital value chain and the digital ecosystem. And I thought it would be absolutely a privilege to have a chat with you, specifically around what's going on at the moment, the crisis, the situation, but also in terms of where you see the technology markets heading to some extent, and obviously the impact on India from a recovery standpoint. How do you leverage digital for recovery? So thank you for that. But before I get into it, we I think this COVID-19 is a watershed moment, right? And people have there's enough being said. There's about the economic crisis, but I think in general, I think it's fair to say, the economic crisis is a fallout of what is foremost a humanitarian crisis. So I think the impact on people, whether it be friends and family, for some, whether it be teams, your employees, your partners, your customers, everyone's getting impacted. So let me first start off with, what's the impact been on your teams, because you have a fairly large team in India, and how are you keeping your teams engaged and motivated?
yeah, it's a very deep question for every leader, I would think, Amit, because this, like you rightly said, it's an unprecedented time. It's a time that none of us has faced as leaders or as employees, where you don't know when this is going to end. This is extremely risky for life. It it has exposed the fragility of life itself, which has never happened. And plus the fact that the business overall is impacted too. So, leading in these times, I can only share with you my reflections over the last couple of months or so as we have seen this unfold. One, it has really made me think on what do I stand for as a leader? What values do really matter to me? And to me, building trust becomes very important. Having honest and open communication really matters. Having transparency on exactly saying what one feels matters. So all of these really important. And what is our purpose? If you really think about, you talked about Intel having a unique position. I completely agree. I've been in the company for 20 years now, and Intel has played a remarkable role in the ecosystem uh, from the point of view of enriching every um, human being's life, I would say, through PCs, through technologies we build, servers, cloud, data centers, all of it. We have had a profound impact. And I think that's a great purpose to have for an organization. So to me, it has been how do I reflect that purpose as a leader in how I lead my teams? And it comes down to how do you care about them. So things I do, just to make this personal, we soon after the lockdown got announced, we restructured our conversations to having virtual happy hours every week
Right.
to just engage the team. I call few people every single day for the last several weeks because just to maintain the connection. And what I've also realized is people are having professional as well as personal challenges to deal with. Aging parents, parents that have sometimes gone through health issues during these times, and they have found it very difficult to find help. So these are
Yeah.
challenges that you need to empathize and have a conversation and listen. Purely listening is such a powerful thing in these times. So those are some um, opportunities that I have used to engage the team. The second I've done is engaging our customers and partners. I've constantly been in touch with them because they are also dealing with very difficult situation. How, as Intel, we can help our customers and partners in these trying times will really define how we come out of this together, because we are in this together. So that's the second part of how I spend my time. And the last part is very important too. How do I take care of myself so that I am strong enough to take care of the team, take care of customers and partners? So that includes staying healthy, having a routine. So earlier, when the lockdown happened, I would do shorts and t-shirt, but it didn't give me a sense of routine. And routines are very important when it comes down to a scenario where the end date is not known in times like these. So if you structure a routine that gives you purpose, that makes it much easier. It has made my life much easier because I do business casual clothes these days. It gives you a purpose that you're getting to office or working. I've got a defined role at home because I'm very poor with cooking. I have tried a couple of dishes, but I'm still very bad. But I can do the chores very well. So I mop the floor, I sweep the floor. So that way I contribute towards making my family better and making their life better. I thought we had mentioned this to you, our ambition to get to 100 countries. We got to 65 at the end of our Nepal trip in December, and that was the last. We have we have not restarted, and
Hey,
both of us are really dying to travel. And of course, in instances where I could uh, engage and help the community through donations, because you are all stuck at home and it is safer for everyone to be at home. In those times, how can you help the community? That's also been some of the efforts that I've personally engaged on. So essentially, helping the team, helping our customers and partners, and staying true to yourself and taking care of yourself have been the three aspects of my focus over the past several weeks.
and Prakash, that sounds really a very sensible approach. And I think, as they say, before you help others, you got to help yourself so that you're strong enough to help others. So I think seems like over the last couple of months, you've done a lot of introspection and you've put a lot of these measures in place. Now, just taking a slightly different tack, I had a different question for you to start off the business discussion with, because obviously you do play a big role in shaping that digital ecosystem in India and globally as a company. But you talked about communities, right? And as we get into India, there's a lot of talk of smart cities and smart governance that we've heard. And do you see that the basic architecture of this digital governance will start to change as well? Because is it going to be about smart cities in the future, or does it really need to get down to smart communities? Because different communities have different needs now, and I think we will see different sets of communities with very, very needs that'll emerge.
I do. I agree with you that overall, digital technology can really help us respond to crises like these. And it's a big learning for not only the government, but all the companies all over the world. So this will fundamentally change an organization's point of view on how I should prepare for a time like this. And if you look at India, India has done a tremendous job on digitization already. So the results of that is showing in times like these. I'll give you a couple of examples. If you look at our supply chain ecosystem, despite the pandemic situation we had, the e-commerce players were able to deliver the essential services to all parts of the country. A great example of digitization helping the cause in these times. Second, digital payments. It started during demonetization for digital payment acceleration as a trend, but now those companies have played a vital role in making sure that the transactions happen smoothly. I can give you a great example. We were ordering so many times food from outside to groceries from outside. The payment structure in this country is so seamless. extremely seamless. All of this is great example of frictionless service delivery model that I do agree that after this pandemic gets over, it is only going to accelerate.
And are there any particular sectors that you feel will need to adapt really rapidly to stay relevant and surge on?
Amit, I think the fallout of this is going to impact every vertical. You would see every company, CEOs of all organizations really rethink their business continuity principles on how do they get ready for the next one, because the next one is also going to come, I'm sure,
Yeah.
sooner or later. So how do we get ready and emerge stronger from it? So that's a big question for all of us. Specifically, though, I would see a couple of areas that we will see a major mentality shift. One, work from home. Given the cure based on epidemiologists is some time away, you could argue the time frame, but it is still some time away. So you still need to maintain social distancing, but carry on the business too. So work from home becomes a very interesting trend to watch. Does not mean that everyone works from home even after pandemic uh, moves on. But the fact that there will be flexibility in the workflows, that is here to stay. So I do think that trend will continue. And how technology and tools evolve towards serving that cause is a great one to watch. And I'm very impressed by the collaboration tools that I have been exposed to, whether it's WebEx to Teams that we are on today, to Zoom, to several others, including Skype. So great opportunity for making work flexible for teams. The second trend I see out of all this is solutions will need to reimagine themselves to become non-touch and social distancing measures oriented, which means instead of touch, you could evolve to voice, you could evolve to gestures, or you could evolve to other means of interface with solutions versus what it used to be earlier. So that is, again, automation, and how that happens will impact every vertical.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. And look, I think just talking about, you referred to some of the stuff the government's been doing, and we've definitely seen a huge uptake of digital initiatives in India over the last couple of years. And in some cases, I think also setting the example, right? Like digital payments, great example of inclusion, financial inclusion. But looking at, I guess, what we're facing now at the moment, healthcare, of course, is the number one focus for all governments, for their citizens at the moment. But there will be learnings that will come up that governments will have to adopt, and industry will have to work with them on areas such as remote health, remote care, right? And not just in dealing with the pandemic, but also ensuring that other healthcare ailments don't get neglected in this sort of a situation if it occurs again. And the third is remote learning, because the whole education industry, I think there's been a lot of friction around adoption of technology. We've all known that it's there, but I think there's been a general resistance in that, which I think coming out of this will have evolved quite a fair bit. So do you think this is an opportunity for the government at the right time when, of course, their priority right now is to deal with the current situation, but some of the critical factors, at least for a market like India, would be remote care for the elderly and so on, remote health, and remote education.
I would think so. It is a significant opportunity for the country, and they are already starting to look at it. From everything that I read, there is thinking in that direction. And I'll give you a couple of ways that one needs to look at all of these verticals as change that will come about. If you look at healthcare, and if you look at India, it has one of the most adverse doctor to patient ratio, 1100 to one doctor. That's the ratio. So it becomes very difficult to deliver quality healthcare services to bottom of the pyramid. In fact, to every citizen in the country. So one needs to look at how do we build an infrastructure that caters to high quality services delivered to all? Second is how do we measure or maintain supply? So, in general, the approach has been to have a pipeline of doctors and healthcare industry service people that can cater to the demand that one sees. The other way of looking at it is in pandemic times, how many more would we need? And whole world has been exposed to some fantastic story of frontline workers doing the job that they are right at the edge of this war against corona. But ultimately, one needs to look at in non-pandemic time, how do I build a supply for that? That's the second instance. How do I build a pipeline that can cater to devastating times like these? The third part is how can I help or use technology to enable some of this? That's where your aspect about remote patient care, remote um, healthcare, or diagnostics. Uh, who knows? On 5G, you could also do remote surgery. So those are the kind of things one can look at in terms of implementation. Similarly, for education, if you look at education today, the quality of education being delivered in small towns is impacted by high quality teachers not being there. Can technology help? For sure. It can bridge that divide. And ultimately, the ecosystem of solution providers can help us do that. A lot of them are already in the country. We have got very cool startups that are working in education technology. We are also having a committed government that has driven some of these initiatives, like Swayam, on digital tools and content. So you have the right environment to really push the boundaries on what's possible in future. I will stop with one last comment that is common across healthcare to education and several other verticals is this build up of a local ecosystem as a consequence of COVID-19. Because all the governments, including India, would look at building or getting more self-reliant on either diagnostic equipment to education related technology to be built here. And we have an opportunity to really accelerate it in the coming few months.
Absolutely. And look, I think you summarized it really well, Prakash. And I will just leave you with one thought maybe to comment on is, I mean, I see a huge role going forward in all that you described, especially in this whole space of learning, education and learning, because a lot of the education, the reality is it can't all be done remotely. There are aspects that require practical training, but perhaps a space that someone like Intel can be pushing the boundaries with immersive technologies.
I, I, I do think because we are a big believer in education. As a company, uh, from the time we were founded, Andy Grove, Bob Noyce, and Gordon Moore have strongly believed in education because we are a tech and cutting edge semiconductor technology company. So we have always invested in education related efforts. Even our pandemic response technology initiative that we recently announced, 50 million initiative for a variety of um, uh, focus areas. One of them is education, as an example. So I do think the technologies that we build, whether it is PC technology, which we believe is a great tool for learning, or whether it is our partner ecosystem that builds on top of it to provide great solutions for teachers, educators, and students, or whether it is engaging with parents to make sure that it's a very safe and secure environment so that their kids are learning in a secure way. All of these places we can play a tremendous role towards raising all boats. And we are committed towards doing that.
Great. And look, I probably want to have a separate discussion with you around a couple of those areas. But just moving on, I wanted to touch on this whole issue of you talked about supply chain, right? And I think it's been amazing to see how that's been working in India, all the way from goods being delivered and transactions taking place. So I think kudos to that. The big issue that comes up is food sustainability, right?
Mhm.
And especially in these times have shown that there is a big risk, not just for developing countries like like India, but even developed markets, right? Um, India is predominantly an agrarian economy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we know that there are lots of initiatives, digital initiatives, that can enable an overall inclusion across society, whether it's payments, whether it's supply chain, whether it's manufacturing. But looking at agriculture and production, I mean, do you see, given the role Intel has played in so many aspects of automation, IoT initiatives, do you see an opportunity for governments and industry in India to be working specifically to bring down to the grassroots level in a practical way some agri-tech initiatives that will enable a safeguarding the farmer, but then also ensuring that there's I mean, India should effectively have food surplus if the supply chain is in order. So any thoughts on that?
I agree with you on sustainability as a theme overall would gain currency. Because think about it, 50% of humanity being in lockdown. And we have so many examples of pink flamingos coming into our lakes, to all kinds of birds and animal species walking around in areas where we have never seen them. So, if all of this is not a wake up call for us to be really mindful and build a sustainable approach in the organization, nothing else will be. So, I do think the sustainability cause will accelerate within the companies, and consumers will also give credit to companies who are having sustainability as a pillar within their organization. So that's first. The second, I do think, is from an agri-tech point of view, absolutely, given the impact that it can make in a country like India, that certainly is one of the areas where I see opportunity in a couple of different ways. One, across every vertical, especially in areas like agri-tech, cloud becomes an accepted service delivery model towards bridging all parts of the ecosystem, whether it's farmers that are growing to end consumers who are ultimately consuming that produce. It has been more difficult to connect that supply chain, but using cloud and technologies like that, we have been able to make progress over the last few years. And I think that can build momentum. That can also give fair prices to farmers and make them or help them, um, I would say, rise up in terms of the social standing as well. Because despite having such a vital impact on the country's economy, poverty is still rampant within farmer community, as an example. So it can have a huge positive impact. The second thing I would say is in terms of automation tools and technologies that can help, including weather monitoring, including can I use those tools and technologies to be purposeful about which crops to grow in which parts of the country, so that we are having sustainability in mind, but we are also ensuring that the whole country gets the benefit of it. It's just one example of how tools and technologies used right can play a defining role in the country. So yeah, agri-tech as well as farmers being in the center, and technology and tools enabling them to do better, huge impact for the country.
And then moving on to the way our society, the way the society is built up, the makeup of society in India, right? I mean, India has arguably one of the most productive segments of society, and not just in abundance compared to any other economy. India stands apart, right? Lots and lots of youth. How do you, and you've seen the impact of unemployment in some of the major markets of the US and Europe. I think everyone knows that. How do we enable further employment opportunities using technology? Because it's going to be hard, one, to skill up everyone very quickly. But what can technology do to create those employment opportunities in India?
Yeah, I would agree with you that India is in a very unique position. We are the youngest country in the world, and that gives you such a significant runway in the future. So that's the first one. The second, I would think, is given the youth population, the education and the impact that it can have in terms of reskilling and constantly learning can also be game changing for the country. And tools, technology can certainly help. So we are doing initiatives like AI for youth as an example, and we work along with our ecosystem uh, and the government as well towards such efforts. So it is to expose the AI tools and technology so that everybody can get benefit out of it. And because of the learning that it imparts, it can actually raise the board across all youth. That is just one example of our effort, but all the ecosystem partners can play a role in education, because education, learning, and reskilling can be a big driver for future growth and employment potential of the youth. The second part I would say is we are also in a very unique position uh, because we are software led. A lot of software services companies have been born here and they have built themselves as world leaders. So a lot of the global IT transformation effort that is going to happen as a consequence of COVID impact, this talent can build for the world. Think about that as an opportunity. That is one thing that I have continued to think about over the past couple of months. We are housing the largest service providers on the planet, some of the largest ones. The entire world is going to be in the midst of digital transformation to make sure that next time such a situation happens, they are better prepared. And who is going to drive that digital transformation? It is talent like this. So if the talent development and skill development, one part is how do we build that talent within the schools? The other part would be how do we build that same talent within the academic institutions as well as the industry? Because you have an opportunity to make a big impact as a country based on that global talent, which is housed in India today.
That is such a good point. I mean, the way you put it, Prakash, that talent pool that's going to actually create the transformation impact,
Yeah,
a big chunk of that is sitting in India. And the opportunity to leverage that and try out new things presents an opportunity for India as well, within
yeah.
India. Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
it's a
that's a
once in a lifetime opportunity for us, especially for the global service providers to make a defining impact on digital transformation for Fortune 1000 companies on the planet.
that is a very valid point. Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. So, just moving on, I guess, to your business, Prakash, and your industry as a whole. I mean, one of the things that we're all seeing is one, there's going to be more demand for devices and hardware. We know that people are starting to realize limitations of the form factors that they have. But at the same time, we know that there's a huge impact of the supply chain in the current context. Um, so, I mean, first of all, what do you expect this impact to be in the short to mid-term of supply chains for the hardware and devices industry? And what are some of the steps that can be taken?
I do think that the supply chain would undergo a major rethink across all companies. And the reason for that is very simple. All the companies would look at de-risking their supply chain for future such instances. So that would mean hardware industry is no different. And you would see alternative ways that companies structure themselves. So you see other parts of the global ecosystem evolve. Southeast Asia is a great footprint of manufacturing countries, manufacturing oriented countries like Vietnam, like
Yeah.
Malaysia as an example. India is a fantastic example of that as well. The smartphone industry has evolved pretty rapidly. And I see this trend only accelerate in the future. Because think about it this way, in shorter term, as governments look at the pandemic response, they would also feel, going back to the earlier comment I made in terms of self-reliance, trying to have an ecosystem that can be self-sustaining is going to be a huge priority for all the countries in the world, and India is no different. So having a construct of an ecosystem that can serve the need for businesses, customers, citizens at large, for every country is going to be significantly important. A fallout of that would be the supply chains, the way they will evolve, and how they would structure themselves in the future. So India, based on the size of the population, the increasing affordability that is coming through, the youth, and the network and infrastructure growing up. We are the fastest 4G network on the planet, just as a case in point. Fiber is coming into the country, so infrastructure is dramatically improving. The opportunity to build out the hardware ecosystem is really, really great for the country. So I do think future looks very bright for India on that front.
So, an opportunity for Prime Minister Modi to further accelerate his Make in India initiatives?
I do think so. Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a significant opportunity. And again, all of us can play a role in that. It's going to be a public-private partnership, like you also mentioned. Government can play a role. Companies like Intel are strongly committed to that cause. And several of our partners, I'm sure, will be committed to that cause too. We are, just as a data point as well, is we are the largest design center outside of the US. It's a great testament to the commitment that Intel has had for 22 years that we have been in the country, and we have grown strength to strength. So we see a tremendous opportunity in the future.
Agreed. So, Prakash, just taking a step down into your partner and customer ecosystem, the real world you have to deal with every day. I know that there are a lot of initiatives you drive which have a high societal impact and socio-economic impact. And we've talked about some of those things, but you have a business to run. You have to make sure that your partners are making money and your customers are getting what they need. And I'm sure you're facing challenges just like everyone else. But a question for you, more, I guess, not directly just for Intel, but there's a lot of your peer group companies and some of the large technology vendors who have large capital financing arms.
Right.
Most of them do, and it's a good model. I think it enables the adoption of their technology and solutions or products, and at the same time, it enables the adoption of technology within an industry. Now, we know that some sectors are going to be impacted more than others. Now, do you see an opportunity, or are you seeing a trend that some of these capital financing arms of these large technology vendors, are they stepping in to support their partners and customers to finance their technology requirements so that they can accelerate or at least deal with the situation as best as they can?
I have not seen that trend yet, Amit. So it's hard to comment, but what you are saying does have logic to it, given the fact that cash is going to be king in the short term, and anything that you can do to tide through this situation in the short to medium term, on any measures you can take to reduce your cash dependency would be definitely welcome, and financing rather than investing in capex becomes important as a consequence. So I do think that logic holds. So every company is going to look at it. Whether if we have seen that trend explicitly play out just yet, not so. We have also just, as a case in point, we have done from an Intel partner ecosystem point of view, we have done channel relief as well. We have rolled out a set of initiatives which could help or support our customers and partners during these times. And we'll continue to evaluate in the future also what more is needed. But there is one thing that, on building on top of what you said, becomes relevant is longer term. I do think that companies would evolve to looking at as a service models in a variety of forms. So you can think about it as, it's obvious to think about it in cloud. Cloud is always as a service, but can you look at it in other services? Can you do video as a service? Can you do gaming, cloud gaming as a service? Can you think about smart city? You talked about smart cities being on offer. Can you do those smart city services to the citizens as a service? Sure. So all of this would be some model of financing, but it's the thinking that is needed would be business models. And I see evolution of those business models in variety of verticals in the future in the country.
I couldn't agree more. I think huge opportunity for a lot of industries to try and pivot themselves and align
Yes.
around that model. It's just out of interest, Prakash. I was watching a documentary with my boys yesterday, and it was basically how all the airlines have dealt with the aircraft because it has to be protected, right? Because they're susceptible to rust, corrosion, other environmental factors. So they have to really keep them parked in places, not just places that will protect the aircrafts, but then also availability of maintenance services. And it was heartbreaking to see where, when you see some of these sites where the aircrafts are parked. In Arizona, there's a site where there's about 1,500 aircrafts parked.
Wow.
1,500 from different airlines. Singapore Airlines has some of their aircrafts in Changi, but then also some of the aircrafts in a desert in Australia because they have to keep them in a dry environment, right?
Right.
And they need to have facilities. And then it gets you to think whether, an extreme end of that would be even the airline industry, the Airbus and the Boeings of the world, and there's been a lot of talk about it for years, whether they need to re-evaluate what their model needs to be. Is it aircraft as a service to airlines rather than airlines hoarding these aircraft and then I think there's going to be a lot of rethink in general. So that was a very extreme example, but I'm sure there'll be a lot of other examples that'll emerge. Every adversity brings different sets of opportunities, and hopefully
Absolutely.
everyone will take the opportunity to seize the moment and pivot.
Yeah.
Any other sort of last words, wisdom, Prakash, as we sign off?
I would think I would end with Andy Grove's quote. He's one of the founders of Intel. You all would know that, but he's someone who I have followed very closely. I've read his books. I would strongly advise people to read Only the Paranoid Survive, High Output Management. More recently, I read Swimming Across, which is his personal biography, which gives you a sense on who he was as a human being. But he said, crises always end. They may take a short time, they may persist for a while, but they will always end. How you prepare during those times of crisis will determine how strongly you emerge towards the end of the crisis. So I do think that all of us need to really look at it in that way, because this is not going to be a short haul. This is going to be a long haul. This could take some time before it settles down, but this is our time to really think about how do we make our team stronger? How do we make our teams come in when they are working from home inspired? How do we collectively raise the bar in terms of creating a purpose which is very powerful within our organizations that can stand the test of adversity like these? And if leaders listening in, I would seriously encourage all the leaders to think very deeply on what's the value and what's the purpose that you're leading with in these times. And I've also always mentioned this to my teams, is that business comes as a consequence. It's always about people. It's always about teams. So if you take care of the team and if you take care of your people, people will definitely take care of the business. It is never the other way around. So that would be my last some thoughts to end with.
Prakash, very profound thoughts to leave us with, and I think I've really enjoyed this session with you. You know, apart from talking about technology and digital, just to get your perspective on some key attributes which are more important than ever at the moment. Empathy and sense of purpose and leadership. It's been fantastic. So thank you, Prakash. for everyone's benefit, I've been speaking to Prakash Mallya, who's the managing director for the Intel Sales and Marketing Group in India. And Prakash has been in the midst of this digital ecosystem for over 20 years. So, Prakash, it's been wonderful speaking to you. Thanks a lot, and I wish you well and wish your teams well.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Amit. Really enjoyed the conversation. Wishing you and your family the very best.